in if I haven't got.
Sorry, I forgot to press record.
Oh no. Do we need to start over?
No, it's just maybe just say hi, everyone. My bad. I'm suddenly remembering.
Okay.
So now that we're recording, I'm Kiersten, and I'm here with Jodi Christensen. For the people who are live,
we've been live, and now we're just on the recording. It's different.
No one's recording.
Okay. So ask the question again, and I'll answer it again, just so it's recorded and we can post it.
Excellent. Sorry. So the question was how. No, it's okay. That's the fun of live.
Yeah.
How do you select the books that you want to edit?
Okay. So I was saying with yours, I found you at PitMad. And you would, as an editor or an agent, if that's what you are, you would like a pitch. And there are other pitch parties on Twitter, even though PitMad is gone. But after you like it, then that's letting the author know that you're interested and you want them to submit pages, chapters, however you specify. So you sent yours in right away, and I read it right away and requested a full. I believe I had that within the first day. Probably less than 12 hours. Like, it was fast. It was right away. Fast. Yeah. And then from there, we just read the stories and kind of decide if it's, for me, it's how much editing does it need? Like, do I love the story? And for yours, when I started reading, I kind of forgot that I was supposed to be looking at how much editing it needs because I was just invested in the story. Which is what you want. Like, that is what you want. Yeah. It is. And so I kind of knew right away that I was going to recommend yours, but I knew I had to finish reading the whole thing so that I knew everything that happened. Right. Because you don't recommend without reading the whole thing. But if somebody just submits to Champagne Books, editors have a list of the genres that they like. And when something comes in, the editing manager will let us know if we haven't got a lot to do. Say, hey, I've got, this story that I think you might like. Would you take a look? And that's kind of how the work comes to us. Does that answer your question?
It does. So maybe. Oh, go ahead.
So how I select the ones that I want, it really is based a lot on, am I pulled into the story right away and invested? Because if I'm not, it's going to be hard for me to want to work on that book, because you have to, it's intense. Editing is intense, and you have to love it to want to work on it. Yeah. And the other thing is how much editing does it need? Because sometimes you can love a story, but realize this needs a lot of editing still. So then you would give them, a revise and resubmit and tell them all the things you want them to do. And sometimes those will come back to you and sometimes they won't. Yeah. So that's how I choose, is I really have to be invested right away. And then I just want to know how much editing it needs.
Yeah. And what kind of genre? Oh, go ahead. Can I just add to that? For me, it's how they start. So the fact that you got sucked in is amazing. Love that.
Yeah. I mean, truly within the first, I can usually tell, I don't know about you, Sev, but I can usually tell within 1 to 3 pages if I'm going to want to read the whole thing or not.
Yes.
If you haven't got me by 3 pages, I'm probably not going to keep going, because why? Yeah. And that's even being generous. I want you to get me on the first page.
Yes, same.
You do.
And you got Kiersten on the first page.
She did. She got me on the first page. Yeah, she really did. And actually, it was your first line, just so you know.
Ooh, oh, really? Now
from that first line, I was like, why? I immediately wanted to know why.
And now I want to hear the first line.
Time hates me. Yes. Time hates me. That was it. It's that simple, and then it just flies from there.
It does. And I knew going in that yours was a time travel, because in your pitch you had the tags to let me know that. So had I not known that it was a time travel, maybe I would have had to read a paragraph to really have it get me. But to go in knowing that it was a time travel and have that be the first line, I immediately wanted to know why. Like, who is this person and why does anyone hate her, or anything? Like I wanted to know why. And so I kept reading. And the more I read, I would forget that I was reading with a purpose, to try to decide something. I was just reading for the enjoyment of reading, which is rare when you're an editor.
Rare. Yeah, it's very rare.
It is. It is. And I've actually had that happen with 2 books recently, yours and one other one. And I've been like, this is my year, because that doesn't often happen,
Yep.
So
I'm just here blushing. Thank you. I do want to share though, because Jodi said how fast that was. That was super fast. And I mean, I obviously had my package ready to go, but I was on vacation when Pit Mad was happening. I know Jodi knows the story. But so I had my laptop with me, and Pit Mad was on. I had everything to schedule ahead of time because we were hiking through the battlefields of Yorktown while Pit Mad was going on. So I was still doing research for the series and taking photographs and just loving history. And to come back from that hike, and it was in the upper 90s. So I really felt what the soldiers were feeling that day. It was so damn hot. To then have that request, I'm like, oh my God, I was freaking out. So I sent it in, and then to wake up the next morning and there was the request for the full, it was just, that was the coolest vacation ever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, unrelated, but my first novel was also picked up through Pit Mad, and I remember that feeling. I do. I remember that feeling of getting the request and then getting a request for a full, and then realizing, this is actually really great. Like that feeling is like, you'll remember that the rest of your life. You'll remember that first time feeling of having that request and having that, knowing that you're getting a contract and all of it. You'll remember it your whole life. It's the best.
God. Yeah, the morning the contract came, I had just woken up. It was Monday. It was early, and I'm just quick checking my email on my way to the bathroom to get ready for my day, and there's a contract offering to publish my book, and it's like the whole world just stopped. It's very cool.
Yeah. Can I share something about my contract that I got? Mostly because it's such a good story for me. I got my first contract 2 days after Christmas. And I remember prior to that, my mom passed away right before Christmas. So for years and years, Christmas was associated with that. And now Christmas is associated for me with getting my first contract to publish. And I don't know, I always kind of felt like a little divine intervention there too, like
your mom's
my
watching.
mom always rooted me on and always believed in me, and to get that contract at that time, changed my whole feeling about Christmas. And so now it's been a good memory and a fun thing to be able to look at that and have that positive instead of feeling the sorrow for the other. So it wasn't to make anyone feel bad, but just to say like you'll remember it forever, and it's such a good feeling, and it changes something in you on that day. Just does.
I was pitching at a Champagne Book Group pitch party on Facebook.
Oh, okay.
And I pitched The Huntress and Zayax Fox, and I got an email that said we'd like to take both.
Oh wow!
So I got. I was, because she said we want to represent you, and I was like, for which one? And she said both. So that was quite cool.
That is cool.
Yeah,
I was like,
that's amazing.
And now you get to like your 18th book, and you're like, yeah.
Oh no,
that's funny. I know, I kind of get it though, because like I have over 80 short stories that have also been published, and after a while you're like, oh, I gotta go sign these contracts and then go do the dishes or whatever. Like your first contract, people are buying you flowers and balloons and it's
champagne
dinner and and after so many, not that I'm ungrateful, believe me, I'm not ungrateful. I appreciate every story, every person who's read every story. It's not that at all. It's just you just can never recapture that first one. That feeling, of that first one. So I'm excited that I got to be there for yours.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited too.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to jump to one of your questions?
Yeah. What would you say is the theme of your book?
That I had to think about that because there's a lot of themes that I'm working with, but I think the one that's probably the easiest and most prevalent is that everyone is the hero in their own story. Mm-hmm. So in my books, the antagonists are not necessarily bad people. They're just focused on their purpose, and their purpose just doesn't necessarily match with Savvy and Jonathan's. And even the so-called our heroes are not pure and perfect people. Right. So they make mistakes. They say the wrong thing. They're not these golden idols. And that's going to carry through very heavily through the series.
And I do think you're right about saying that your antagonists are not bad people, because people on both sides of the Revolutionary War believed in the side they were fighting for. Right. And it wasn't really a matter of I'm wrong and you're right or whatever. It was more like where do your loyalties lie? Yeah. and where do you see the future going, and what direction for you and the people that you love and for the things that you want. And it's very true that the antagonists in any story, they're almost never going to think they're the bad guy. In their own story, they're not the bad guy, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So I do think that's very true. Yeah, for sure.
Actually, going back to you as an editor, do you have a ritual that gets you started for your work day when you sit down and start editing?
Not so much a ritual as that I have an order in the way that I do things.
Okay.
So I don't do them out of order, because then it really throws me. So, but like I generally make 3 passes through the work. So the first pass is just me reading the chapter and marking anything that jumps out at me, like right off the page immediately. And then I go back and I will plug the chapter into Pro Writing Aid, because that helps me find all of the echoes and all of the adverbs, things like that. And as I'm going through that, I will also mark punctuation and other little things that jump out to me, because at that point you're slowed down a little bit. You're not just reading. Yeah. And then the final pass that I do is I listen to it being read out loud on my computer with the computer voice. Yeah. And that helps me catch things too. So I don't do things out of order, and I don't generally stop in the middle and say, oh, I'll come and listen to it being read later, because I want to keep my mind in that, on that scene or in that chapter, and kind of see, like, you know, if I lose the feel of it, then I almost feel like I have to start at the beginning again of that chapter. So I edit like a chapter at a time. Yeah. And so I go through the whole chapter in that way, with the 3 passes. That's how I do it. I know there's probably hundreds of ways to do it. And obviously, as an editor, you don't rely on Pro Writing Aid for things like punctuation, because it's often wrong. Yeah. But it does have really good usefulness in helping you find adverbs and echoes, because those are sometimes hard to see as you're just reading, because you're just reading the story, thinking about the plot maybe more instead of how many adverbs are on this page, you know. So that's a really good way to help things jump out at you like that.
Yeah. And do you do that for every chapter, or do you a chapter at a time?
I do.
And when do you send it through to Kiersten? When it's 3 chapters, or when you've done the whole book?
I usually will divide a manuscript into sections. So I do that because then we're always moving forward. Like, I can be working on a section, and when I'm finished, I'll send it to her. And then I'll start on the next section, and she's working on the first section. So that way we're both always working and moving forward. Yeah. And I know some people prefer to have the whole manuscript sent at once, but I find with first-time authors especially, that's really overwhelming to get, you know, your 100,000 words that's all edited and marked up. It's much easier in smaller chunks. And I prefer to work that way, just because like I said, then we're both moving forward together at the same time, instead of waiting on, like, her waiting on me or vice versa.
I do the same.
I think it would drive me
it's
nuts.
More manageable.
But also definitely. You might make a change, a crucial change in chapter 3 that impacts chapter 7 or 8. And now you've already edited it. So for me, it makes sense to do it in chunks. And also, if I win the lottery and I stopped editing, at least we've done half the book. That's how I'm thinking.
Right. That's true. It would be pretty easy to send it on to someone else.
And sometimes they have 40 something chapters or 58 chapters. It is overwhelming as an editor. Like, oh my word, 58 chapters.
It is. Basically what I do when I get a manuscript is I usually like to have 5 to 6 sections, depending on how long the book is. So, I mean, if it's a book that's maybe 60,000 words, we might only have 4 sections because that's shorter. I typically like the sections to be between 15 and 20,000 words because I find that to be manageable. I can get it done within about a week or a little less, maybe 5 days. I shoot for like 5 to 7 days for each section. I don't always keep to that because life happens, but then you have allowed yourself enough time that, it's okay. So, but that's kind of how I think, did we do 5 sections with yours or 6? I can't remember. I feel like it was 5.
I don't remember. Probably 5 because
I feel like it was 5.
Yeah. That would make sense because it was 107,000 words.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I think I was around 20,000 or so per section, give or take.
And I haven't, I don't know what the questions are on either side, but I would like to know, to know, Kiersten.
Yeah.
Has this whole journey on editing with Jodi impacted the way you write? Now,
absolutely.
Obviously you're working on book 2. So how has that impacted? Do you still, can you hear little Jodi's voice in your ear when you want to add an adverb or something specifically your style?
Well, what's funny is I had written book 2 and started book 3 before I finished revising book 1 and polished it to send it out because I was still researching and still finding my voice and just finding the world, the magical world. I need to get a good grip on it before I feel comfortable sending it out. But yes, I am right now revising book 2 based on beta reader feedback. And yes, as I'm going through and polishing it, I do hear Jodi's voice and Cassie's voice. And oh my God, there's too many adverbs. And now I know what my sin words are that aren't on the sin word list that now I have to really watch out for. So
right. I had one author tell me at one point she had had another book that she submitted and someone else edited that book because I was full on my editing schedule. And she emailed me one day and she says, I really miss hearing those little messages from you saying she can't see this about herself, which I thought was just the cutest, funniest thing. So I think it does, like, as somebody who's also been edited with my work, it does change the way that you write. I think it has to, like, you learn so much through that editing process.
Right. Yeah. And that's the nice thing about, I think, writing a series for Champagne Book Group is now that I've gone through the first book and I know the in-house preferences and, I came in with my own copy edit skills because I was an editor. But to apply it and how it applies in writing, it's a little easier because now, like Seb kind of said, you can write towards that, what the goal is and what's going to be preferred. So
well, and I think ultimately the goal for us as editors is when we get your second book or your third book, each book is going to be less work that it needs. That's the goal.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Write the perfect first draft.
Right? No pressure.
No. I don't think that's possible. Yeah, but
I'd still try.
We do try, don't we? But it's not possible.
Editing is horrible.
So Kiersten, tell me then about your writing process. Like, what do you do when you're going to be sitting down to draft? Like, how do you get into the right frame of mind to do that?
So for this series, because I've been living it for so long, it's thankfully just I sit down at my chair, I light a candle, I put on some music in the background. A lot of the time it's the Last of the Mohican soundtrack, but it might be Gladiator.
I love that.
Yes, totally. Or I'm a big Bear McCreary fan, so Outlander soundtrack is really huge in my repertoire. And then that's just it, the coffee, the water, and just sit from 8 p.m. until maybe 11 p.m. and I usually go back a chapter, maybe two, and revise, because it gets me back into the headspace of the characters and the stories. So it gives me that nice through line of voice and theme and tone, and it makes it, I think, easier on revision, because then I'm just sort of big picture, and I'm hopefully not cleaning up those problems.
So
and those
do you actually
arcs.
like finish a scene before you're done, or do you like leave off in the middle of things? When you're done for the night?
As in, would I keep going and stuff? I know, because sometimes I only end up getting like a couple sentences in, depending on how good the writing session is for me. So I might, if I have a good writing stint, might get a full chapter and some done. Like I said, some nights it's not more than a sentence, but because I've been working on revising at the same time, it's still progress, and that's what's important.
I just know I've heard some people say, no, I've got to finish this scene, or I've got to finish, this paragraph. I don't want to lose my train of thought. And I've had other people say they will leave off in the middle of a sentence because they'll time themselves, and when their time is up, it's up and they're done.
Oh, no, I wish I could do either of those. I can't time myself. The same way people say they have to put in so many words a night, I can't do it, because that would stress me out too much to have those kind of requirements. And I do need to finish a sentence. I couldn't stop mid-sentence. But no, I don't have that problem of I'd lose my train of thought. If I'm in a thought, then I will just finish it. If I can, but I don't have the luxury to stay up too late, because you do have to get up the next morning and work.
Yeah. That is true.
So then, Jodi, what would the dream project be for you as an editor, that, something you're just really waiting for to put in your repertoire, something you haven't worked on yet that you want to?
Believe it or not, I think yours is the first time travel story I did. And I had been wanting to do one, and I had looked at a few and I had read a few, but they weren't quite right. But I really bad wanted to do a time travel story. And so that kind of for me was the dream project, because that, like I said, is my first love, and it's what I read for pleasure. I'm a really big Outlander fan. I'm also a big Stephen King fan, and he's got a really great time travel novel himself, and that I've read several times. Like, I love it. So I don't know. I always wanted to work on one. I wanted to edit one. I wanted to, kind of see what the other side of it was like, to not just read it as a reader or write it as an author, but to work on one as an editor. So, up to now. So now I've got to find a new dream project, I guess, because, that I've done the time travel now. No, it was great. Yours was a lot of fun to work on. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Well, hopefully you keep saying that to the rest of the series.
I'm sure I will.
Oh, thank you. I love you, Jodi. You make me feel good. I'm all like warm and happy now.
So here's another question for you.
Okay.
I'm always curious about this. What came to you first in your book? Did you see the characters first, or the setting first, or something else? Like,
I'm going to say the characters. So for me, I got the idea for the story from a dream. And so that is now chapter 2 in the book, up to the point where I woke up and then I had to figure the rest out myself. But I had a dream of this man who came up behind a woman, put a knife to her throat. And in the dream, he spoke German because he wanted to make sure she wasn't a Hessian spy. And in the midst of all that, she breaks away. They come under attack by redcoats. And then just as he tackles her to save her life, I woke up. So that idea of who this couple was it stuck with me for years. Like I had no intention ever writing a book. It was not the dream. It was not the plan. I actually shocked myself, and I decided I think I want to write a book, and I sat down and did it. But I definitely had the characters first, and then worked in the history and figured out the where after that, because I just knew who they were. And so, and I was actually, when I started writing, really nervous about writing it, because I didn't know it was going to be a fantasy novel. I thought it was going to be straight fiction, just characters from the war, nobody time travel at all. And I ended up changing it because of my Outlander problem, which I guess sort of is the and anyway, so but I was nervous about the history at first, so that's why I chose the setting I did. I chose a place where there was a little bit of fighting, but nothing major. I chose a part of the war
like skirmishes.
Right, they were at a stalemate, so that I could just make it up and nobody could tell me I was wrong, sort of thing.
Right.
And then I found the history, and the history just kind of snowballed and led me where it needed to go. Yeah.
Well, and your research is impeccable. I mean, it really is. And I've always believed, like, even if you're writing a fantasy, I think the key to getting your readers to believe that fantasy aspect of a story is get all your other details right. Because if all your details are right, they're going to be more likely to let you lead them down a path of the fantasy part of the story, because and they'll believe it. Like, and I really think that's true. I really think that's why it matters to get the details right.
Yeah, absolutely.
At least that's my opinion. I don't know.
No, I totally agree with you. And it's been nice. People have been sort of messaging me as they've been reading the book and telling me where they are and what they like so far. And I love that. And that was one of the things that people have said is just the bringing the people to life and the historical aspect of it. So
and that's how you get people to believe the unbelievable, is you make all those little things right. You do your research and you get your research right.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you, if you could travel anywhere to research, either for your own book or for somebody's book that you are editing, all expenses paid, where would you want to go? What would you want to see?
I've had two different ideas of other stories I want to write. I actually really want to write a Viking romance, and I would love to travel somewhere like Norway, do some research and write a Viking romance. I just something about that, like strong heroes, but strong heroines too. Like Viking romance is really strong people in general, and something about that really appeals to me. And I mean, let's be honest, doesn't everybody want to go to Scotland? It's just one of those things, if I could go to Scotland and research, I would write about Scotland. I would. But I honestly think that the Viking romance is a little higher on the list. And I have a story idea jotted down. I have a story notebook, an idea notebook, and I have a story idea jotted down in that, so that should I ever get serious about it, the idea is still there. So
that's really cool.
Yeah. We'll see if that ever happens. I don't know. Someone asked me once, where do you get your story ideas, or do you ever run out or whatever? I'm like, I have so many story ideas, I will literally never run out. I will never get them all written. It's more what it's like. So one thing I wondered about yours, and I thought this because I read kind of a reverse time travel recently, where somebody travels from the past to the future. And I wondered, do you think Jonathan would fare well in Savvy's time? Because she fares pretty well.
All
things considered,
All things considered,
she has her moments, but she, by the end of the book, she's there's an acceptance there. And I wondered if you think Jonathan would have fared well.
I think it would be a little harder for him, because she at least has a father who is a history professor and who is obsessed with the Revolutionary War, that nice gimmick. So she's got a little bit of know-how. And of course, going in the past, I think would be a lot easier than being thrown forward, where the technology, there's like no basis for, what.
Right. It would seem like magic to you, I think, if you were from the past and went forward.
Culture shock.
definitely a culture
for
shock.
Sure.
Definitely.
For sure.
I was thinking about this question. I think the biggest culture shock for him is because he's so shy around women. As his backstory, he just doesn't have women in his life, and even where he is, the camp followers, all the women around him, he just doesn't socialize with them, which is just so much fun when here comes Savvy from the 21st century and her 21st century attitude. So I think that would be like a huge culture shock right there for him, where he'd get thrown into 2022. He's smart and he's resourceful, so I think he'd eventually find his way to like Colonial Williamsburg and
somewhere, right? I could see him like ending up working on one of those living history farms or something, Totally. It would feel familiar.
And I think he would probably need that.
No, one thing I loved about their chemistry, when you bring that up about him being kind of shy, and he kind of is all about being proper too. And one thing I loved, and I always would hear his voice in my head when he would say it, when she'd say, "Call me Savvy," and he'd say, "Miss Moore." And I loved that because it was consistent all the way through, and he just was determined to be proper and show her that respect. And that's not something that you see in this world. And I think he would stand out a lot if somebody were to behave like that in this time. So when I thought about that question, I specifically thought about like how he addresses her and how he talks to people would definitely be something that would make him stand out,
definitely.
But isn't there a Meg Ryan movie like that?
There is.
Yes. And she ends up going back with the it's so cute. Oh my God, I can't think of the name of it right now.
I know. What is the name of that one?
But
I know. I love
the elevator. That is a sweet
story. With Hugh Grant. Not Hugh Grant?
No.
Wolverine?
No. Wolverine. Yes.
Yeah.
Not as pumped up as he is as the Wolverine.
Right. Yeah, that was really a fun movie. I liked that one.
Buttery brioche. I remember correctly. I'm Googling.
Okay.
Well, while she's doing that, Jodi, I have to ask you, so what book, and it doesn't have to be like one you've edited or worked on, but what book needs to be made into a movie or a TV show?
I've thought about this one a lot, and they do so many of them that it's hard to choose, because a lot of the ones that I would have chosen are already movies or a series, and some of them are done really well, and some of them are, you're like, just read the book, it's better, But I got thinking about it, and like I mentioned, I'm a really big Stephen King fan, and he has this story called this novel called The Long Walk.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have heard of it or read it. It's one of his earlier novels, and it's just set in this like, I don't even know the right words for it. It's that I can't think of the word. I'm sorry, I'm like drawing a blank, but kind of like a Hunger Games type of a world. But these boys have to march down this road, and they go until there's only one left, and then that person gets like rich for life, and it benefits their family and all this stuff. So it follows this group of boys as they march down this road. And it was actually kind of the inspiration for a story that I recently had published, that one war story that I did. It was kind of inspired by that thought. So I thought, a story like that is very, very character driven. It's all about the characters. And that's one that hasn't been made into a movie that I'm aware of. And it's one of my favorites of his. I mean, if I had a top 5 list of Stephen King books, that would be on it.
Oh, wow.
Because it's such a great character study in like human nature. And I don't know, like it just appeals to me. So that would probably have to be my pick, because like I said, anything else I would have chosen has already been done as a movie or a series. So yeah. Okay, so I have another one for you.
Okay.
So we did a live a few days ago, and you were talking about divine intervention being at play during the Revolutionary War. that one scene specifically, remember? And you know, when you were talking about that, it literally gave me goosebumps, and I was like,
oh, cool.
was that like a common idea during that time? Was that something that was commonly thought, or was this just related to that one event? And like, how did that influence the way that you wrote some of the magic in your story?
Oh, it definitely did. And you know, a lot of the thoughts, and I've said this before, and I'll just keep saying it, is that a lot of the politics, a lot of thoughts and the beliefs that are spoken of by my characters don't come from me. They do come from the journals and the memoirs of people who were there. So that idea of divine intervention was not just the one journal that I read, but a lot of people at the time were saying it felt like divine intervention. It was in the papers at the time that were talking about the Battle of Long Island, when Washington escapes the British under their noses because there was fog, but only covering the Americans, not the British. So no, there were others. Yeah, it's such a cool story. So that's why I had to throw that in there as Jonathan's backstory, that he was a part of helping that happen. So I'm planning, I'm hoping to get it done, of writing 2 short stories in between books 1 and 2 getting published, to just fill in a little bit of gaps. And that's going to be, I think, one of the stories is Jonathan at Long Island. But no, there's
I loved how that was sort of connected to the way that, you know, you wrote the magic in the story, because I don't know, we'll come back to it, because there's a certain scene that really made me think about that when I was thinking about this question and this divine intervention. And there's a certain scene that you had that really kind of spoke to me in that same way that this story did.
Okay. So. I'm going to ask you when the live is done. I'm going to ask you, because now I'm really curious.
Right, because I don't want to give any spoilers, but there was just this one scene that that's kind of what inspired me to wonder about that in particular. I wondered if that was connected, you know, in some way to that idea.
Well, there's definitely, since you asked, there are definitely other stories that people attribute to divine intervention. And Savvy talks very early on about the discovery of Benedict Arnold's betrayal of the Americans. And I think if there's divine intervention, it was definitely how that came about. I don't know if other people spoke of it that way back then. I'd have to look, but it definitely feels that way, that people were on the road at the right time to stop, you know, Major Andre.
But she has the perspective of hindsight and knowing, you know, the outcome.
That's going to be very problematic for her down the road. There's a little teaser for you.
Right. I can imagine. Okay.
So do we have time for one more question each, or I know we
shoot?
Okay. So, all right. So since we talked about the live that we just did, you had mentioned that you would fact check me, as every good editor should and does. And you acted with surprise about something that you fact checked me on and said, "Oh no, that actually was true." And so I've been itching to ask you, was there something specific that you fact checked me on that just jumped out at you?
I mean, overall, I feel like, I mean, there were little things that I checked here and there, because I'm like, oh, did this happen at this time, or was this the right word for here, you know, for this place, or would they have said this word or whatever? But the one that I was talking about were the coins being in pieces. I had no idea. I had no idea that was a thing, because every book I've ever read, they don't talk about pieces of coins. They talk about, I see that, they talk about a whole coin, right?
Right.
And when I saw that, I was like, wait. It kind of blew my mind when I looked it up and realized that was actually the way that it was. I had no idea. And I love historical stories. I love history, and I've read a lot of historical books, and I'm like, how did I never know this? So that was really cool to learn that.
Okay, cool. That's good. I hope people walk away and learn new and fun things. I was gonna guess it was the corn cobs, but which surprised, that changed a lot, by the way, because I started writing in May 2019, and then COVID hit and toilet paper shortages were a huge thing. And so the way that scene got written several times, that she was so distressed of there being no toilet paper but corn cobs.
Right. I've actually have heard that though, about the corn cobs. So that one wasn't a surprise. And that was the other thing, like a lot of things I might Google it and look at it, but it was just to confirm that I already what I knew, you know what I mean? Yeah. Just in talking about things like the way that they did laundry, or the way that they had, the bathhouse, or the, the bathing room and things like that. But those were things that like I already knew, but just general locations and their economic status of a household can change those things a little bit too. Yeah. So it was more confirming things that I already knew. But yeah, the one that the coins was a surprise to me. I will say that.
That's cool.
So I do want to ask you, like, what was your favorite and least favorite parts about the editing process, and anything you were surprised by?
I think the thing that I was surprised by was when I read The Galley and was done editing, and it was really just a, check and make sure there's nothing wrong. You can't fuss with it. And just taking that step back and out of the weeds and looking at it big picture in that way, if that makes sense, because yes, you're looking for the commas instead of periods, but at the same time, you're really just reading your own story. Right. I haven't done that in so long. And it did surprise me, and it shouldn't have, just how differently you see things and how differently you can read your own story that way once you do step back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess my favorite part, and the process is not the favorite part, it's getting out of it. But when you get stuck and you get challenged with, well, could you do something different here? Or that, do you really think that's what she would be thinking? And you just sit there and you just stare at the page, and you're, I have a fidget cube and that I play with, and I just stare at the screen, and to finally have that breakthrough and come out the other side, and then read what you write as a result and be like, okay, yeah, that is a heck of a lot better than where I started. Yeah. I like that. I really like that feeling that, okay, yeah, that works so much better. I really like it. So yeah.
Any least favorite parts?
I think just that when you first get those notes and it's your book baby, and that first, I know not to edit based off of first reading of notes, because you get the emotional reaction first, and you're like, what are you talking about? Of course it makes sense here. You don't know what you're saying.
Right. I think across the board, authors have those reactions. How could you not? I mean,
oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I think that's a shared feeling amongst authors.
Absolutely. And based on the last round of edits that we did right before my book came out, and I was very, very resistant to cutting down a scene that I just loved, because I loved the family interplay and I loved the peace and quiet of it. And it wasn't until, I was told, just take a step back, and I want you to just really think on what's being asked of you. And I did, and I was able to look at it objectively, and I'm like, okay, yes, this scene does need to be tighter, and I'll just release it as a director's cut to my newsletter.
Right.
Yeah. But to come out the other side of that and look at that scene and say, yes, this is tighter, this is stronger, this is better, and it doesn't bog down the pacing. Yeah.
Right. Well, and I mean, there's always going to be a natural ebb and flow within a story. You're going to have some parts that are faster paced and some parts that are a little slower, and that's okay. But you're right. I mean, it is hard when you have to take some of those scenes that you love and you have to cut them back, because you're like, but I need this. Yeah, I've done it too. We've all done that.
Yeah, you just love it.
I need these words. Yeah.
Okay. I think we are out of time. So thank you, Sev, so much for helping us with all the background. And Jodi, I always love chatting with you. So this is great. I'm glad you suggested it.
And it was fun. I'm glad we did this too.
And we are planning on trying to make this a regular series. So we will be back, not necessarily me, but maybe helping people out. And Sev will definitely be helping people out. And you'll be hearing from a lot of other Champagne Book Group authors. So everybody have wonderful holidays and a happy new year. And we'll see you in the new year with more authors and editors.
Okay. And if you haven't already, check out Witness to the Revolution.
Oh,
it's an amazing, wonderful book.
Thank
so
you.
Good.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Links in the bio.
Links in the bio.
Yeah. Night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.